Guys can remember The Path, Season 1, Episode 3 of Homecoming, and I was really looking forward to this episode. I've really been enjoying the show so far. As you guys know, the first two episodes have really impressed me, and this episode I thought was really good. I definitely really enjoyed, but I did feel it was definitely the weakest of the three. There wasn't a whole lot going on with plot. We basically found out a lot more about the characters' mothers and sort of why they are the way they are, which I thought was a good way to do it, but there wasn't really a plot-driven episode. It was more of a character-driven episode, which I'm perfectly fine with, but there just wasn't as much going on. It wasn't, I think, as interesting as the first two, but I still really did enjoy this episode. I thought this still was a really great one. Like I said, weakest of the three by far, but I definitely still really enjoyed it, and I would definitely, give it probably like a solid B if I had to like grade it. Not in any way a bad episode, but let's just get into it because there's a lot of things I really did like about this episode, and there were some things happening, especially I think at the end that I will definitely get into. But let's just get into this episode. So we start off, and basically we see Cal is sitting by the bedside of Meyer, basically, because as we know, Meyer, in fact, is he is indeed catatonic, as, Eddie saw. This is not just something that Eddie saw. He is, in fact, catatonic, and Cal wants to figure out a plan for secession. He has a big vision for the movement, and he can't afford to let it grind to a halt. And as we know, Cal wants this to be a lot more public. Like, he wants the public to know a lot more about it, and anyone that doesn't support Meyerism, he wants them to do something about it, and wants them to be violent. And everyone there with him, Peru, though, just wants to keep praying, you can tell. And they just want him to keep faith. That's what Meyerism's really about. It's about keeping faith. And I heard a lot of people say we don't really know what Meyerism's motive is. I mean, you gotta remember, the idea of Meyerism is that it takes your pain away, and that it's a way to get you through certain things. And I did like in this episode that we did start to find out what you can and can't do in Meyerism, because there are all these kinds of rules, and we already knew some of them. Like, for example, you can't really go to someone's house that's not Meyerist, just really interesting stuff like that, but I thought they really expanded on that very well, and I definitely really enjoyed that. Where you can tell what kind of episode this is going to be. So, Eddie's at a lockdown, the 14-day program that, Sarah insisted he go to, and basically, because, of course, Sarah thinks he had an affair, and he gives a mini sermon to fellow believers about the value of making mistakes, and basically tries to convince everyone that he's back on track, which, of course, as we know, he didn't have an affair, or at least we don't think he did. They think he did, but we don't think he did, and I don't think he did either. We know that it's really just he's losing. He doesn't feel like, Meyerism is the thing that he should believe in. He doesn't really believe in it anymore, as we know, and basically, that's kind of what's going on, but he's not going to say that. He's going to make it seem like he's having this affair. And basically now, because of this, now he's focused on, trying to get out of there. And unfortunately, there are no consequences of this interrogation, we realize, which is very interesting. And in order to get through it, Eddie confessed to a non-existent affair with fellow Meyerist Miranda Frank. And now Miranda's been brought in to confess her crimes, which she quietly, understandably refuses to do because she didn't do anything. But again, they just need her to confess. And the apparent protocol when someone who's transgressed doesn't unburden properly to cast them out is basically doesn't burn properly is to cast them out, to basically seclude them away from the rest of the world, which is very interesting. But Cal orders Miranda brought in for further interrogation. He says it's a special case because it has to do with Sarah and her family. And as we know, Cal has a deep attraction and attachment to Sarah. Just then, however, he's interrupted by a phone call and rushes off. And when Sarah asks about it, he says it's church business and tells her it doesn't involve you, and it's not church business at all, but an issue with Cal's estranged mother, over whom he has significantly less power over, we realize. And we do find out a lot more about Cal's mother in this episode, which I definitely liked, but very interesting stuff, because that kind of sets up what this episode's going to be. That's more about learning these characters' mothers, Eddie's and Cal's mothers, which I definitely did like, and then Sarah basically trying to interrogate Miranda Frank on her own, and you knew this was going to get really bad, because, I mean, the one thing that Sarah doesn't want to have to do is confront the person that she thinks is the person her husband's having an affair with. Obviously, she doesn't want to do that. It's very awkward for her. But nevertheless, she has to do that because Cal can't, and she just figures, all right, whatever, I'll do it. So at high school, Hawk is now watching guard while Ashley uses the school showers, because as we know, Ashley did confess to him that she has a lot of problems with her power and things like that, and that she doesn't really have a lot of, she doesn't have a lot of water, and she's using the school showers. She's clearly embarrassed, but Hawk tells her that it's not her fault her mom didn't pay the power bill, and Soon, though, the bell rings and it's back to status quo as Ashley runs off. And again, no one else knows about the secret. So she has to stay very calm and stay very just collected about it. Like there's really nothing going on. Like there's nothing, really to, think about that. This basically is just simply, just her having a conversation with Hawk. She can't really think much of it, which I do like the direction they're taking this storyline. Honestly, probably one of my more interesting parts of this episode was where they take Hawk and Ashley, because I do like where this relationship is going. And as we know, Hawk did get pretty badly beat up last week because of what happened between Hawk and Ashley's boyfriend, which we don't hear about in this episode. I don't know if we'll see him again. I'm sure she's dating him still, but we know he's an asshole and things like that, so we'll have to see where that goes. And you can definitely tell they're moving closer to Hawk and Ashley getting together. Now, probably one of the biggest developments in the episode, though, is Gaines, because as we know, Gaines last week, he basically found out about the Meyerist cult, thought they were going too far, and in this episode, we can tell he's definitely starting to do something about it. Unfortunately, they are kind of doing what I think they're doing, that there really is not much of a character for Gaines other than he's a detective investigating what's going on. Because basically, he previously was concerned about the Meyerist, and now he's following through by infiltrating the compound, and he even goes through a recorded entrance interview and gets a tour of the compound from Eddie. Eddie tells him all about the great sustainable energy they're working on and the new workforce they're training in those techniques. But Gaines is most concerned with the fact that they seem to be recruiting their workforce from the ranks of the storm victims and refugees they claim to help, because he doesn't really feel that they are helping them. He feels that they're just, basically bringing them in, that they're basically, using them to get people to join Meyerism. And in many ways, yeah, I get his point, because in many ways that is what they're doing, that they're just trying to get people to join Meyerism. They want more Meyerists in the world, and we know Cal especially wants pretty much the entire population to be Meyerist, and, you can tell that Eddie's very much against that. Gaines is as well. For me, though, Gaines just isn't really doing much of anything. I understand what he's trying to do. He's there because he feels they're going too far. I get that, but this episode, he just came across as another detective, and I just want them to do a little bit more with him. They don't have to be Will Graham. I'm not saying that. You don't have to do that, but I just want a little bit more than just an investigation is going on. And this episode, the investigation is not officially going on, but you can definitely tell that's the direction we're headed, that there's definitely going to be a case, and that's going to happen, and I think that's fine, but we already have enough drama in the show. We don't necessarily need it, but it does go with the idea that Cal's going too far, so it didn't upset me too much. It was just kind of like, alright, I just want a little bit more with Abe Gaines than just the fact that he is investigating what's going on. So Eddie meets with Allison again, tells her he's committed to Meyerism, and as we know, he told her that he found out her husband committed suicide and doesn't question it, because as you remember, he didn't see any files on her husband or anything, and he says his vision of the catatonic Meyer was just a temptation by the dark. Alice tells him there's no dark, no light, just them, and she says she knows him now, and he can't hide the truth. It does sound like an affair, and that basically it does sound like he had this affair, and it seems like he doesn't want to admit it, but from what Allison's saying, maybe he did have an affair, which of course, she was the one that saw it, so very interesting if he did have an affair. We don't know if he did. But we also know that there are no records for Allison's husband, and he doesn't tell her this, but, he does tell her that he found her husband committed suicide. So, again, we have to wonder, again, like I said last week, is this a cover-up, or did Cal possibly kill this guy, or somebody in Meyerism wanted them to kill him? Because, again, as we know, they don't take non-Meyerists lightly. If you're a non-Meyerist, they pretty much hate you, and they want nothing to do with you. So, did they actually kill him, or did they let him live? It's a very interesting question. I can't wait to see where that goes. So Sarah goes in to talk to Miranda Frank. The one thing you can tell she really doesn't want to do, and this scene is already very intense because she wanted Cal to accompany her, but he's occupied at the moment, and Sarah high-mindedly tells Miranda to tell the truth. She just wants her to admit she had this affair, and while Miranda screams about how Sarah can do anything here, her family are like the Kennys of Meyerism or something, it sounds like they're having two totally different conversations, which is interesting. And you can tell that Sarah just wants her to tell the truth. Mom Miranda is more about, how can you do this? How can you accuse me of such a thing? You've done so many things as well. You're too powerful. It's very interesting, and I like the way that this was done, the way that Sarah's storyline was. I will admit this was my least favorite part of the episode, everything going on with Sarah and Miranda Frank, because if he did have an affair, it would make things just a little bit annoying, because like I've said, I think the affair trope is just something I've seen so many times in shows, and this show doesn't seem to be doing this. It kind of is doing something new with it, in the sense that he doesn't actually know if he had the affair, but at the same time, it's not really doing anything new with it. So that's like the one thing that's not exactly working for me. And I did like the actress to play Miranda Frank. I have no problem with her. I think she did a good job. It's just that part of the episode was my least favorite part, because I just don't like the way this is going, and Sarah especially, they could be doing a lot more with the character. In this episode, she's just bitching a lot, which I understand she's really upset, and she has a right to be upset, but she's not even listening to Miranda Frank. Like, Miranda Frank even says, just let me talk to Eddie. I want to talk to Eddie. Because that could get her closer to what she wants. If she listens to this conversation, because what Sarah could have done, which I know she's not really thinking about, and what I think would have been the logical thing to do, is get Eddie and Miranda Frank in a room, basically listen to their conversation, and then know for sure they had an affair or didn't have an affair. That would be the way to take this, but that's not what happens. The entire episode, Sarah's just making Miranda Frank go more and more batshit, you can tell. So anyway, it turns out that Cal visited his mother for the first time in 3 years because she recently started a grease fire in her apartment, and I gotta say, probably one of the best parts of this episode was Kathleen Turner as his mom. She was just spot on. I mean, you can tell that this is a mother that loves her son, but she hasn't seen him in a while, and there's been a lot going on there. Basically, he hasn't seen her either. She started a grease fire in her apartment, and he wants her to move her into an assisted living facility for her own safety, and she agrees, but only if Cal breaks one of his religious vows and gets drunk with her, which we find out is something that Meyerist can't do, and that's very interesting that they can't do that. That's something that I don't think we knew yet, that Meyerist couldn't get drunk, but now we knew that in this episode that getting drunk is prohibited when you're a Meyerist, when you commit to that. So I found that to be very interesting. I really enjoyed that, and basically, again, it's not something huge, but it's just interesting. I like finding out what Meyerists can and can't do, because again, this is a made-up religion in the show, of course, so they can do whatever the hell they want with it, and I like that they're kind of just being like, no, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong, that's right. They're really trying to play into Meyerism. I think they're doing a very good job with that, and if anything, I think that's the most fleshed out thing we've gotten is what's going on with Meyerist. That and Hawk and Ashley, because Hawk and Ashley, like I said, they're really developing well. So Hawk tries to explain his burgeoning struggle of faith to Ashley, but as one might expect from a teenage boy raised in an introvert community talking to a girl for the first time, he's very awkward. He even ends up insulting her by calling her ignorant, so she walks off. He asks her if she even prays. She tells him to pray for her power to come back on, and that scene I thought was pretty funny. I mean, to her, he's just being annoying and is just being rude, but again, remember, he's never met a girl before, and he's a very awkward kid, so I like the way this was done. I thought it was very interesting, and as we know, it's a very introverted community. There aren't a lot of people to talk to, and Ashley is not part of the Meyerist cult, so clearly he's never really met a girl like this before. He likes her, but he just doesn't know how to talk to her, and I think they handled that really well, because it came across as realistic. I mean, if you were to live in this cult where you didn't really talk to a lot of people, yeah, obviously it would be kind of awkward to talk to a girl for the first time, and I liked the way they did that. I thought it was very, very realistic, and I really enjoyed that. So Cal takes his mother for a tour of the nursing home, and it does not go well. She calls him a cult leader in front of the nurse, and then goes further. She calls him a quack over and over again. Crazy scene overall, just the way this was done. And Cal finally snaps, telling his mother he'll let her die in the street, because that's what she deserves, and that freaks her out, because he literally says, I'm gonna let you die in the street, that's what you deserve, and we know how much he cares about Meyerism, and the fact that she's insulting his religion obviously really upsets Cal. We know that he has this demon inside of him, and I really think they're doing that really well, showing how Cal is so addicted to Meyerism and how much, it means to him, that if anyone just a little thing, just by calling him a quack over and over again, this really gets him. And to that, it's like, calling him names or something. Meyerism just means so much to him, and Meyer in general means so much to him. Even, in fact, when she says Meyer, it's interesting what Cal says. He doesn't seem upset. He says, Meyer's the only person that ever cared about me. Mainly because you can tell his mother did not support Meyerism, and I think his mother does care, but she just doesn't support Meyerism, and because of that, she's dead to him, and I think it's very interesting. I like that, and really crazy stuff, but Hugh Dancy is really selling this performance very well. I think he's really doing a good job. So back at home, Sarah's mom tells her that Hank cheating on her was the best thing ever happened to their marriage, and outside of the grill, Hank tells Eddie something similar. Hank understands how easy it is to be tempted by new flesh, but it's also his daughter who has been supposedly cheated on, so he's not super compassionate, but Hank does talk about the lengths parents will go to protect their kids from pain, and basically, he's saying, look, if you, had an affair, just confess to her what you did, and I'm upset, but just confess what you did. And I like that we're finding out that Sarah's mom and Hank went through the same situation, because again, we don't know if Eddie had this affair or not. He's denying he did, but Allison's claiming that maybe he did, so very interesting. And I like it, but at the same time, I don't want it to be that Eddie had an affair. I want it to be more than that, and I hope it's more than that because we know he's off about Meyerism, and we still don't exactly know why. So just as dinner's about to start, both Sarah and Eddie get calls for help. Cal is drunk and frustrated that one day with his mother has made him break his various rules. Sarah tells him that it's just a moment and it will pass, and that, he shouldn't worry about it. But I love the way the scene was done because Cal doesn't feel like himself. I mean, Meyerism is what he's been raised by. This is something that he's been told is the right way to live. And imagine if someone defied just who you are. That's how Cal feels. He doesn't feel like he's just been, someone has defied his Meyerism. He feels like they've defied who he is because he is so addicted to Meyerism. That's part of his life. It's his personality. Everything goes into it that he just doesn't feel like himself. And you can tell why he's feeling so weird and everything. And I definitely really enjoyed that. And again, drinking is something that Meyerists don't do. And I like that Sarah says, look, this is just a moment. It's going to pass. Don't worry about it. But we know that Sarah's also very interested, but she's not as obsessed like Cal is. And I like the way they're contrasting those two, because they could be something where it's like, oh, they're not that much different. But no, they really are. While Sarah follows Meyerism, Cal is the definition of Meyerism. And you definitely see that in this episode. So I really enjoyed that. So Allison drives by the house, which enrages Eddie. He tells her if she ever shows up again, he'll kill her. It's not a threat. He says she doesn't know where he came from. And Allison has a silent freak in her car about losing her only ally, because this is the guy that she can talk to. This is the guy who will believe her, and she's not getting through to him for whatever reason. Mainly because he doesn't want his marriage to crumble, he doesn't want bad things to happen, and he doesn't want to admit what he really did. So Allison really wants to get through to him, but she's just not, she's not getting through to him, unfortunately, which really sucks. And you can definitely tell why things are getting bad between Eddie and Allison. But it's also because it isn't helping Eddie and Sarah's marriage. Basically, we see maybe one of them got forced into a 2-week imprisonment and the other still refused to talk to him. And Eddie says he's done everything he can. She has to meet him halfway. There's also a very interesting scene where Sarah's performing like this ritual on him that's like a Meyerist ritual. I don't really remember what it was, but it was very strange. Sarah responds she can't stop thinking about him and Miranda Frank, especially now she's in the compound. She wasn't supposed to tell Eddie that, and he's clearly distressed, and she thinks it's something happened between him and Miranda Frank. And as if Allison's anger to make it clear, Eddie's attempt to walk back his doubts is costing others dearly, as you can tell, because he wants to not admit how he really feels, and that's really ruining a lot of his relationships. You can definitely tell his marriage is starting to crumble. It's not terrible yet, but I think it's going to get worse as it goes on, and Allison clearly wants to get through to him, and it's just not working, and she's going to have to take, I think, a lot more extensive measures if she does want to get through to him. So Sarah once again confronts Miranda herself. Miranda tells her quite reasonably that whatever's going on in Sarah and Eddie's marriage is none of her business and it's not her fault. And I like that she told her that, but this makes Sarah snap like Cal did at the nursing home. She screams, calls Miranda a whore, keeps her locked inside her cell. Really crazy stuff. I mean, Sarah doesn't seem like she's listening to Miranda at all, because again, she has these doubts. She has the story that Miranda did this, and she's not going to listen to anyone else because she feels she knows what's going on. She thinks that Miranda and she absolutely thinks that Miranda and Eddie had an affair, and she doesn't want to hear any other suspicions because she feels that's the only story, which is very interesting. And the fact that Miranda's deliberately telling her, I didn't do anything and I had nothing to do with this, it should show Sarah that maybe she's telling the truth, just maybe, even though she doesn't think it. Maybe she should be listening to her because she's not, and basically that's what's going on there. So Hawk finds a way to turn Ashley's power back on. This is very interesting. He tries to sneak away, but she sees him, and when she asks him about the next day at school, he says he didn't want her to live without light, and she kisses him. And again, like I've said, this is a very Romeo and Juliet kind of situation, because she's a non-Meyerist, but Hawk is starting to feel love, and he doesn't know what that is, because again, he hasn't talked to girls before. He's very introverted. He's not someone that's very social, and because of that, he doesn't really know what love is. But I think that she's realizing she's starting to fall in love. She's starting to realize what love really is. But he really doesn't. He just doesn't understand the feeling of love. It's not so much that, he doesn't know what love is. It's that he doesn't know how to experience that kind of thing. And he knows that there's something going on, but he doesn't really know what it is. And it's really interesting to see. I love the way they're handling that. One of my favorite parts of the show by far so far is Hawk's character, because he's just very conflicted. I mean, he's been told Meyerism is the right thing, but his dad is going against it, and now he has this girl that is a non-Meyerist, and there's nothing really wrong about her. She just doesn't support Meyerism, and he doesn't really feel like he's upset about it. He wants to help her, because again, when someone's in trouble, it is Meyerist's duty to help them, and Basically, that's why he wants to help her. But my question is, I mean, does he really care about her, or is it just that he wants to help her because of his religion? That's what I find very interesting. I can't wait to see what happens with that. So Gaines visits Mary Cox's father Wesley in the hospital. Cal really did beat him viciously, as we see. As we know, this was Mary's father, and Wesley wants to know why they haven't arrested Cal yet, because he feels that Cal should be arrested. Even though Wesley's done all these things to Mary, who we did not see Mary in this episode. We're seeing her next week, but we didn't see her this week. Abe asks him whether he wants them to just grab Cal for an assault charge or build a big enough case to send him away for 30 years. And Wesley says that he calls Cal a monster and says that that monster has his daughter. And Gaines passionately responds that he has 3 daughters, and yet he has his word that he'll bring his daughter back. Obviously, he doesn't know that Wesley has sexually, abused and Mary's been a sex slave for years. He doesn't know about any of that. To him, Gaines is just Wesley's just a guy that really wants his daughter back, and Gaines can relate to that. He wants his daughter back, and Gaines completely understands that. He's not really thinking much else of him, which I like the way this was done, because that kind of gives Gaines, like I said, even though Gaines is a detective, it does make him compelling, because now he has this whole situation where he doesn't fully understand the situation, but he does know that there's something going on. He wants to basically try to track down Mary, and we'll have to see what happens there, because we know it looks like next week he's going to try to track her down. We'll have to see what happens. That's going to be very interesting. But basically, I like the way that the show is that I think Wesley does love her. I think even though he's sold her as a sex slave and things like that, I think he does care about her. And definitely, I like the way that it was done. So, definitely very interesting. And basically, we see, even after their blow up, Cal has sent his mother up in the nursing home. She reminds him that he's her son, not Myers, and that wanting to be someone else never works. And that line's very interesting because it kind of alludes to the idea that Cal wasn't always this way. Maybe he was different, and this kind of makes me want some flashbacks, honestly. I'm honestly wanting some flashbacks of seeing how Cal was pre-Meyerism and pre-Meyer bringing him into this world, because we know that Meyer brought him into this world when he was 11, but we don't know prior to that how he was. And from what his mother's saying, this isn't actually how Cal is. He's so blind by Meyerism that he's not actually acting like himself, and she really knows who he really is, and you really start to understand that it's not his mom's fault he's this way. It's that he's decided to go on this path, and it doesn't really seem like there's any way of getting him out of it. I think Cal, his mother wants to get him out of it, but this isn't really how he is, and she closed the blinds he had opened, saying that it's too bright, and really, really interesting overall. So like I said, that's like the one thing I really want. I really want some Cal flashbacks. Cal then talks to Sarah about Dr. Meyer. He says the founder's whole and he's getting ready to die, and it's time for a new leader, and he feels like he should be that new leader. But again, we don't know if Meyer actually said this, or if Cal is just thinking that he's the new leader because of everything that's happened. And Sarah's apparently totally on board with Cal taking over, which is great. But again, she doesn't, I think, realize what Cal really plans to do. That Cal wants to do these really extensive things and make things a lot more violent and basically force people to join Meyerism. I mean, there's no telling what Cal can do. And I'm going to say this, if Cal joins Meyerism, there's going to be a full-on war between Meyerists and non-Meyerists, because non-Meyerists, as we know, are like dead to them. For example, his mother, even though, I mean, she's his mother, that's the difference. Someone else that's just random, Cal doesn't give a shit about, but his mother, he kind of does understand her, and I thought that was very interesting. Kind of a side of Cal we haven't seen before, and what I like about that scene the most, that it does show that Cal is not completely heartless. He does have a heart, he does care about people, but he's just so blind and deep into Meyerism that it's kind of changing who he is as a person, which I really do like. So afterward, Eddie goes to visit Miranda. It's technically restricted, but he gets through by using Cal's name, and basically it's the way that Cal does with Meyer, and we find out right away that something's not right with Miranda. Like, when Miranda wasn't answering, I'm like, oh no, either one of two things. She's either been kidnapped, or she's committed suicide, and the latter, Miranda has committed suicide, it looks like, and it makes sense. I mean, obviously, Sarah got to her, she was forcing her to do all these things, and that's basically how the episode ends. So, overall, guys, a really great episode. I definitely really did enjoy this episode. Like I said, the weakest of the three for me, but those scenes with Cal were the best things of this episode. By far, my favorite part of this episode were the scenes with Cal and his mother, because it does show that Cal wasn't always this way, and there possibly is something else that happened to Cal. Because again, we don't really know everything that happened to Cal. I mean, remember, Sarah gave us very small details. Cal was rescued as a boy. Meyer brought him into this world, and ever since then, he's been obsessed with Meyerism. We don't know anything else. What happened in between? What are the details? We don't know any of that, and we don't really know what his mother was feeling, and that's something I want to know, and I like that the show hasn't directly told us that yet. Because a lot of shows, they'll just tell you a bunch of information and basically tell you exposition, but this show's not doing that. It's taking its time with the details, and I really like that. And we know a lot about Cal. Now we're finding out more about him, and I really do like that, and I think it's very interesting the way they're handling that, so that's really interesting overall. But let's talk about Miranda Frank, because what's going to happen with her? Obviously, she's now committed suicide. What is Eddie going to do about this? I mean, Eddie, I think, now needs to confess, did he have this affair or not? Because now that Miranda's died and committed suicide, there's no way of finding out if they actually had this affair. Now remember, Eddie's denying it, but Allison's starting to think that maybe he did have this affair. And if he did, I mean, again, I don't necessarily want him to, because I think it's one of the lowest cliches you can have in a show, just because I've seen it so many times. But I do think it'd be interesting if they did it here. They could do something different with it. We'll have to see where that goes. I think that they're opening up to be very interesting storyline. Gaines and Mary. Obviously, he doesn't really know what Wesley's doing to Mary, but it's clear he wants to bring Mary back. And we also can tell that Mary, as we know, I think is starting to develop feelings for Cal. And I think kind of is going to start to like Cal a little bit. Maybe she's going to be the one to bring him back to his former self. If you remember, he had strict things like her not giving him a blowjob or her not having sex with him. There has to be reasons why. I mean, there's never been a rule that says Meyerist can't have sex. He's never specifically said that. So there's something going on with Cal psychologically. What it is, I don't know, but that really interests me. And like I said, out of everything, that's really what I want to learn. I want to learn the psyche of Cal. I want to get into his head, and the way they're setting him up, I think, is definitely going to be very interesting. And I can't wait to see where that goes, because that whole storyline is just really good right now. And then also with Eddie and Sarah, Eddie just needs to confess what's going on. I know obviously he doesn't want to say, oh, I'm non-Meyerist and that I don't believe what you're doing, but he needs to tell it to Sarah. He needs to let her know that he does still love her and has nothing to do with that. It's the fact that she's a Meyerist and he's starting to turn into a non-Meyerist, and he's not a non-Meyerist yet, but he definitely is starting to shift to those non-Meyerists and is starting to feel less and less, lesser like one and more like a non-Meyerist, and I like the way they're handling that, so that's very interesting. And then as far as Hawk and Ashley, I love the way they're handling this. Like I said, it's like a Romeo and Juliet 2.0 in the sense that Hawk doesn't really understand love, and in many ways, Romeo didn't understand love. You guys know that story, in the beginning, Romeo has that girl, Rosalind, he thinks that it's love, and it's really just an infatuation. It isn't really love, and this Hawk, though, has never really experienced love, because he's been secluded from that. He's never met a girl before, so I'm really interested in seeing what Hawk's journey is going to be like. It's honestly kind of a cute storyline, I'm not going to lie. I think it's pretty cute the way they're handling it, because of the fact that Hawk and Ashley, I think Ashley's going to teach him things that he didn't know, and he's also realizing that non-Meyerists aren't really bad. Like, they're not bad people. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're bad. They just don't necessarily have the same beliefs. But that doesn't mean that they can't fall in love. And I really feel that's already happening. Even though Ashley has a boyfriend, just from that kiss, you can tell this is going somewhere. And I love the way that was done. Really great stuff. So overall, guys, really great episode. Definitely really enjoying the show. Like I said, didn't necessarily get the plot moving as much as I would have wanted it to. I think next week's going to be a lot more plot driven, but I do love the way the show is headed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Definitely really did enjoy it, and we'll see you guys in my next show, which will be for tonight's episode of Arrow, which, guys, tonight is going to be huge. We will find out who ends up in the grave. I'm not prepared. I don't know who it's going to be, but I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.